She was amazing. She was constantly curious about what was happening in the kitchen behind those doors. The princess's cooking skills were appalling. That's what she herself said. She was not a good cook. Of course, your time spent in the royal family's kitchens is what made you most famous. I worked as Queen Elizabeth's personal chef for 11 years at Buckingham Palace, where I also served Princess Diana, Prince William, and Prince Harry. He remained mute for over 20 years, observing from the sidelines as difficult truths were concealed beneath well-crafted headlines, and royal tales were repeated. History painted its own picture of events, but Darren McGrady, the former royal chef who once catered to Princess Diana and her young boys, stayed faithful. However, he has had enough of observing from the sidelines at the age of 63. At last, McGrady has spoken, his voice sharpened by years of stillness, and Queen Camilla is at the center of his discoveries. From private heartaches to palace kitchens, the romance of Darren McGrady and Princess Diana started in the quiet nooks of a royal kitchen, not beneath chandeliers or at official dinners. With almost 20 chefs, Buckingham Palace's culinary staff was thriving in 1982. One of them, Darren, was young, ambitious, and at the bottom of the ladder. Out of 20 chefs, he was number 20. His first jobs were anything but glamorous. He frequently prepared frozen goods and peeled vegetables for royal employees. But destiny had different ideas for him. The UK was commemorating Prince William's birth that same year. As everyone's eyes were on the royal baby, Darren and the young Princess Diana were developing a more subdued bond. This marked the beginning of a relationship that would experience happiness, heartache, and ultimately unfathomable grief. Darren learned more than simply recipes. While working under head chef Gabriel Chumi, he gained survival skills in the traditional, close-knit realm of royal service. In the presence of the royal family, there were unspoken guidelines for appropriate behavior, speech, and more frequently silence. However, Diana was unique even in such a strict setting. She was unique. The royal family's vacation retreat, Balmoral Castle in Scotland, is when Darren first saw her in person. Diana would casually go into the kitchen. In contrast to the majority of royals who maintained a formal distance from the personnel, she would stop in for a late-night snack, sometimes barefoot, sometimes in a bathrobe. A handful of fruit, fresh orange juice, and yogurt. Her demands were straightforward. What amazed Darren, though, was the way she always murmured, "Thank you." She occasionally even assisted with dishwashing, which left the kitchen workers in silence. Diana was not as depicted on newspaper covers as she was in those fleeting human moments. Despite what Miss Budge and my other teachers may have believed at the time, I did learn something. And I made a lot of friends who I still see now. She was warm-hearted, friendly, and approachable behind the tiaras and titles. Darren saw her infuse a palace that was frequently burdened by centuries of formality, with humor and fun. Through small everyday rituals, rather than large gestures, their bond became stronger over time. Diana had a particularly noticeable tendency: apple, celery, carrot, and her evening juice. She would make a decision based on how she felt. These modest requests developed into a reassuring routine, and Darren's private method of showing concern. However, that lightness started to wane as the 1980s gave way to the 1990s. Diana and Prince Charles's marriage was in disarray, and the BS from Camilla Parker was still hanging over everything. At first, the adjustments were little. Darren saw that her hunger was waning. She wouldn't always request her customary juice on certain evenings. Darren was still anxious, but he prepared it. He sent it up to her room one evening when she hadn't placed any orders. She took it all at once. Later, Darren acknowledged that she appeared to have been crying. Simple, quiet, and intensely personal times, like those were when Darren first realized how much suffering Diana was concealing behind her public smile. He witnessed the daily emotional toll the affair was taking behind the palace gates, even before the scandal made headlines. However, how did a royal chef covertly observe Diana's secret suffering before anybody else did? Watch this space to discover out. The breaking point for Darren McGrady. It all began with a single straightforward statement. Darren McGrady, who was known for his devotion to Princess Diana and his cautious avoidance of palace turmoil, had been mute on some royal issues for more than 20 years, particularly anything concerning Camilla Parker, B.S. Darren became known as the silent defender of Diana's legacy. However, Darren did something unexpected in early 2023, a few months before King Charles III and Queen Camilla were crowned. He raised his voice. It happened when a reporter asked him jokingly if he would celebrate the coronation during an interview. Darren responded calmly and thoughtfully while the cameras rolled. It seemed mature and balanced to many. Time has passed, he added, and I believe you can respect the present while still honoring the past. However, that was not how the internet perceived it. Within hours, social media was inundated with fury from Diana supporters and royal watchers. While some commended Darren for his poise, many accused him of abandoning the princess he had so devotedly served. For years, Darren's quiet on Camilla had been a powerful statement. One irate fan commented, "Diana's spirit won't rest if you cheer for the woman who hurt her." Another wrote, "You've turned your back on her memory. You should be calling out Camilla, not toasting her." He had given numerous interviews and told numerous tales about Diana and life in the palace, but he had never once specifically brought up Camilla Parker's nonsense. People knew why. Diana's life had been plagued for years by Camilla's protracted and complex connection with Prince Charles. "I knew the media could be interested in what I did when I first entered the public eye 12 years ago. Public sentiment was still strong in 2005, when a YouGov poll revealed that only 7% of Britons favored Camilla becoming queen. However, in front of millions of people worldwide, Camilla and King Charles III were proclaimed Queen Consort in Westminster Abbey on May 6, 2023. Darren attempted to clarify when he reiterated his support for the coronation. According to reports, he told a journalist, "That doesn't mean I've forgotten what Diana lived through." His justification, however, seemed flimsy to many Diana supporters. "It just means I've grown up. My view has changed." They anticipated steadfast devotion, and this wasn't it for them. The criticism persisted. It became more personal, louder, and more irate. And maybe something in Darren finally broke under that weight. The next thing that happened was unexpected. The headlines started appearing once more. This time, it was about something much more startling than Darren's remarks regarding the coronation. He was at last prepared to talk candidly about Queen Camilla for the first time in years. Long-kept secrets, tales he had concealed, and events he had seen. Everything was at last becoming clear. Why now? Why, after all these years, would he speak up? Some people think he was pushed by the public's ire. Some claim it was grief, guilt, or maybe a long-ago commitment he made to himself. For whatever reason, Darren McGrady had had enough of remaining silent. But how, after years of silence, did Darren McGrady eventually step up due to public fury and buried guilt? Continue to observe. Kensington Palace and Diana's personal troubles. The fairy tale ended in 1992. The world was rocked by the news that Princess Diana and Prince Charles had split up. It was the conclusion of a bitter chapter for Darren McGrady, who had seen their marriage fall apart from the palace kitchens. After packing her belongings and leaving Buckingham Palace, Diana moved into Kensington Palace's Flat 8 with her two young sons, William and Harry. Darren thought his regal adventure with her was over. However, the phone rang shortly after. Diana was the one. At Kensington Palace, she desired for him to work as her personal chef. Darren made a snap decision. He agreed right away. Kensington life was more personal, less formal, and less inflexible. The rigid procedures of Buckingham Palace had vanished. Quiet breakfasts with the boys, informal dinners, and tender moments spent with Diana's modest household staff replaced them. However, the agony had persisted. Diana's life was still plagued by Camilla Parker's BS. The royal grapevine, staff whispers, and palace corridors were all filled with rumors. Darren heard a disturbing sound. According to some, Camilla had been subtly happy about the split. Darren heard one story that was especially harsh. According to a friend, Camilla had declared, "He's officially mine. He always has been." Darren wasn't sure if Diana ever heard those remarks, but he was aware that she had deep, unseen wounds. People with HIV are not harmful to know. Thus, you can embrace them and shake their hands. Heaven is aware of their need for it. Diana displayed amazing grace even when she was upset. She was warm and friendly to everyone around her, regardless of how much she was going through emotionally. She was unique because of that. She was Diana because of that. Weeks became months, and Darren and Diana became closer. He observed more intimate moments of her heartbreak that no one else saw. Camilla remained at the center of it all. Diana hovered behind Darren as he cleared plates one evening after supper. This time, she wasn't there for a snack. She uttered things that Darren would never forget in a quiet voice, almost if she was thinking out loud. "I've known all along that I'll never be king. One day, the girl who snatched my husband will be crowned queen." Unsure of how to react, Darren froze. Diana, however, wasn't requesting consolation. With a sorrowful grin, she added, gently wiping away a tear, "You just needed to listen, so don't stress." Years of hurt and disappointment were exposed in that brief interaction. Diana's reality was one of unhealed scars and dashed hopes beyond the gleaming palace walls. Away from cameras and flashing lights. In those latter years, loud disagreements between her and Charles had grown commonplace, particularly when Camilla's name was mentioned. Darren pondered why this one woman was causing so much suffering, because he could hear their heated voices reverberating through the hallways. But he already knew the answer in his heart. Despite his marriage to Diana, Charles had never really let Camilla go. How, therefore, did Diana experience unending heartache as a result of one woman's grasp on Charles? To find out, keep your eyes fixed to your screen. Heartbreak, scandal, and Diana's quiet battle. Princess Diana's personal suffering was tragically made public by the end of 1992. The notorious Camillagate tapes went viral on the front pages of newspapers in Britain and other countries that year. Diana had long suspected that Prince Charles and Camilla Parker were having an affair, and secretly taped phone conversations between them confirmed her suspicions. The country was taken aback. Known for fiercely defending their reputation, the royal family was abruptly thrown into a scandal that no amount of publicity could ease. Diana never discussed the tapes with Darren McGrady. Something changed in her, but she never once mentioned the treachery or the shame. Darren saw the shift right away. The once vivacious, kind, and polite woman he had grown to know grew quieter and more aloof. Meal times became stressful. Her already brittle interest in food waned even further. After years of silently battling an eating disorder, Diana appeared to relapse at this trying period. Darren never inquired. As her difficulties became increasingly apparent behind closed doors, he just watched with concern. Then, in November 1995, Diana did something no royal had ever done before. She sat down with journalist Martin Basher on BBC's Panorama for an interview that rocked the monarchy. She talked candidly about the most difficult times in her life. As she uttered the now famous line, millions of people watched in the UK and around the world. It was a little packed, because there were 3 of us in the marriage. Do you believe that your marriage ended because of Miss S. Parker's nonsense? It was a little packed, because there were 3 of us in the marriage. Her remarks felt like a bombshell to those of us watching at home. For Darren, however, it was expected. He had seen her inner grief for years. The rest of the globe was now at last realizing the reality. Diana was even more courageous than that. In the same interview, she talked candidly about her issue with bulimia, which many others had misinterpreted or condemned. She said in a steady but impassioned voice, "You try to hurt yourself on the outside because you want help." It was a genuine human moment that permanently altered public opinion. Those who had previously criticized her for being dramatic now supported her and saw her suffering in a different light. About a year after relocating to Kensington Palace, in 1993, Darren became aware of another change. It seemed different, more hopeful this time. Diana started putting her health first, working out frequently, and giving her all to charitable causes. She discussed eating problems openly in interviews, stating that diseases such as bulimia and anorexia were ways in which people turned away from true emotional and physical nutrition. Darren saw her radiance come back. "I had never seen her look that healthy." After 11 years as the Queen's chef at Buckingham Palace, he later spent 4 years with Princess Diana. "Well, one of the things I discovered there was that the food had to be cooked. Simple, fundamental meals." For the first time, he witnessed Diana genuinely take back her life, not as a princess confined by castle walls, but as a woman who made the decision to recover and move on. There was optimism again for a moment. How, therefore, did Diana meet such a sad end, after at last taking back her life and happiness? This is something you should not miss. Diana's Last Supper with Darren. It was a quiet Sunday morning at Kensington Palace on August 31, 1997. It was quiet in the kitchen, and Darren McGrady thought it was another typical day. When Princess Diana returned from Paris, he had made a modest, comfortable dinner. She was expected to return that night, eager to spend time with Harry and William before the boys went back to school. In the midst of her otherwise public and frequently hectic existence, it was supposed to be a calm day spent with family. But abruptly and cruelly, life had other intentions. A breaking news headline on TV was the first clue that anything was amiss. Princess Diana was involved in an automobile accident. Darren stopped. His heart pounded. It must have been a mistake or a fake report. However, the updates continued. In a matter of minutes, the same unimaginable words were being said on every channel. Princess Diana passed away at age 36. Shocking claims regarding the passing of Princess Diana. Authorities are currently investigating the recent and dramatic allegation that the British government killed her. "I thought it was a joke," Darren said afterwards. However, as reality struck in, he was left standing still in the palace kitchen, gazing at the food he had made with love for her. He held on to the slim chance that the reports might not be accurate, that she would enter the room grinning, exhausted from her journey, but secure. Then came the moment that crushed all remaining hope. Diana's will was faxed over by the palace. It really hit home at that point. She would not return. The atmosphere in Kensington Palace changed in a matter of hours. There was a profound, sad silence in the hallways that had once been alive with laughing. Many of the staff members, who had spent years protecting, serving, and loving Diana, were in tears as they tried to comprehend the news. Devastated, Darren stood among them. As he gazed at the unfinished plate, he whispered, "I had her meal ready." Soon the entire world was in mourning. The world was rocked by Diana's terrible death in the Pont d'Alma tunnel in Paris, while being pursued by paparazzi. Over 2.5 billion people watched her burial in the days that followed, and more than 60 million bouquets were spread across Kensington Palace's gates. Candle in the Wind, re-recorded by Elton John, performed, encapsulating the grief experienced throughout. How, however, did Darren have to turn his back on the royals when a single horrible night in Paris left billions in mourning? Darren couldn't stand to witness the wedding. April 9, 2005. Many people believe that day to be the end of one of the most contentious tales involving the royal family. Prince Charles and Camilla Parker B.S. finally tied the knot in a modest, low-key civil wedding at Windsor Guildhall. Soon after, there was a religious blessing at Windsor Castle Street, George's Chapel. It appeared to be a new beginning to outsiders. However, that day meant something completely different to former royal chef, Darren McGrady, who couldn't bear to see it. "I didn't observe. I didn't go." Later, Darren admitted, "I couldn't." Princess Diana, however, was one of them for me. Before I met her, I had never done any charitable work. After that, I witnessed the profound impact she had on people's lives. He was already residing in the US at that point and operating a prosperous catering company. But he had never been entirely abandoned by the royal world. Many of his former palace colleagues, particularly those who had worked closely with Diana, remained in contact with him. His phone was buzzing with texts as the wedding day drew near. Some check-ins were humorous, while others were more serious. Former employees subtly acknowledged that they experienced the same uneasiness as Darren. Among them was an underlying anguish. It was more than just a wedding to Darren. History itself seems to be being rewritten. He later claimed that although they ultimately achieved their goals, the price was high. The fact that Charles and Camilla were now formally together wasn't the only thing that hurt. It was the speed at which Diana's memory appeared to deteriorate within the palace walls. It was whispered by former co-workers that things changed after Camilla moved into Clarence House, and then Buckingham Palace. Diana's preferred charities were subtly marginalized. Loyal employees who had supported her were either retasked or fired. Darren recalled that it felt like a fresh start, as if they were erasing and concealing the past. And Darren's mind kept repeating the same line over and over. Diana used to say these words quietly, but with eerie assurance. "I will never be king. One day the girl who snatched my husband will be crowned queen." Darren clung to that recollection, and the silent observations he had carried for years, while he stood far away from the wedding that was broadcast on television. How, therefore, did Darren's silent observations throughout the years culminate in this startling discovery about Camilla? This is when things became interesting. Darren was unable to ignore the silent shifts. Darren McGrady said nothing for years. Behind that silence, however, he had been keeping an eye on things, noting little shifts, gathering memories, and experiencing the gravity of what was happening inside the royal walls. When Darren, who is now 63, did speak up, it was not for controversy or rumors. "It was about something that made my stomach turn," he said. His observations upon Camilla Parker B.S.'s relocation to Clarence House and then Buckingham Palace. "As a 75-year-old, I can only recall the Queen being present. The changes were first modest, making it simple for outsiders to miss them, but impossible for Diana's loved ones to ignore. Diana's carefully selected soft colors for her private bedroom started to fade. Family photos that had formerly been proudly displayed in the corridors began to gradually disappear, particularly those that featured Diana with Prince William and Prince Harry at their most joyful times. Camilla substituted her own floral selections for her favorite flowers, lilies and forget-me-nots. Some furniture was taken out entirely, and others were rearranged. It didn't feel like straightforward redecorating to Darren. She seemed to be altering the narrative. He thought of Diana's tale. Darren was particularly affected by what had happened to the pictures. He recalled how Camilla would pass by and give them a little frown. The message seemed obvious even though no words were exchanged. The photos were moved to less noticeable locations in a matter of months. They were then relocated to private rooms. After 3 years, the final picture finally vanished completely. It truly hit me at that point. It wasn't even a person anymore, according to Darren. It was only a picture. And she couldn't handle even that. That was the tipping point for Darren. He said the comments that startled royal circles in an interview that made headlines around the world. She is a complete evil. He said it to get attention. The truth needed to be spoken after years of suppressing it, so he did. A few palace insiders attempted to dismiss it all as routine updates. However, it felt far more intentional to Darren and other people who had worked directly with Diana. He said it was more than just redecorating. It was a statement, a means of taking the place of what Diana represented. The shift in energy was what made it more difficult. Darren recalled how Diana had restored life to the palace by bringing blankets for the homeless into her car, asking for orange juice, and entering the kitchen barefoot. I supported the coronation, Darren acknowledged, but as Camilla arrived, that light just went out. This was not about resentment, but moving forward doesn't mean we bury the truth. It doesn't mean we forget the cost. It has to do with love. Love even the difficult parts for Diana and the truth. But after years of loyalty, what do you think truly motivated Darren to finally speak up? We want to know what you think. Remember to share, like, and subscribe if you remember Diana.